figured something out.
Oh,
Okay, keep going.
okay. We're joining late. I would like to actually reiterate, I'd like to repeat or just summarize what feedback we've received. We were waiting for Richard Innes to join us. We did commence the meeting at 4:05, also hoping that we would get Zoom access, but here we are, Tree Subcommittee 411 meeting. We are right now going back, individually responding to what the outcome was with Mayor and City Council, which was that Mayor and City Council did agree that we need enhanced protections of trees on construction sites, and that we needed education. And they also did like the idea of incentives to encourage homeowners to keep trees on their property or even to plant more trees.
They also, this hasn't been mentioned, but they also seem to be in favor of some sort of tree recognition program.
They did.
Yeah.
They were positive about the tree recognition program too. Mary Linda Maddie gave feedback that given the lack of support from the MCC, despite Rehoboth Beach, Henlopen Acres, Dewey Beach, and other localities having protections for trees, she proposes that we take the task on of creating a construction ordinance and then disband unless we get tasked with more from the Lewis Planning Commission. Melanie Moser added that Mayor and City Council wanted more education and encouragement of citizens to save trees on private land. She is for creating an encouragement program using incentives to save trees. Rick Spitzberg agreed with Mary Linda, but suggested we creating a tree advocacy program under the LPC with a question mark. I'm not sure who would take that on, but the city would administer, and this would encompass awareness, education. Anything else you would see under there?
Well, Lewis does a lot of things to draw people to town, whether it's a tomato or a tulip or a 4th of July potato sack. And we have a lot of
Fireworks.
Our fireworks.
Also go forth Lewis fireworks, you know.
Or Lewis lights. And, we have a lot of trees that bloom beautifully. Fruit trees, other kinds of trees. So I'm thinking we could just structure maybe something around that asset.
Yeah, tell me if I'm hearing this correctly. You had mentioned Lewis and Bloom, and we don't really have a group of citizens who are championing for trees. And is that kind of where you were going on that?
Mm-hmm.
An idea that you could have is like a tree walk or tree walks during Tulip Festival. So, gathering the people that are here and organize a tree walk to talk about the trees and
The tulip poplars.
right, exactly. Or the red bud or whatever's coming out at that time.
And I realize camellias are trees or shrubs. They're both, correct?
Usually they grow more as shrubs than trees.
Because, we've got one of the few places that really has beautiful winter.
They're woodies.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are definitely more recognition like Lewis and Bloom, but for trees. Okay. I'm going to try to go last on my vision here and not give too much input and just let people speak their minds freely. So Marty, can I go to you and see what you've envisioned after I presented to MCC?
I think, well, as we said, Mayor and City Council were all in favor of education. And certainly there's a lot of education that would be useful for people to take care of their own trees and nurture them. I'm I'm intrigued with the idea of having, drawing attention to our trees in various ways. Doing it during the Tulip Festival would be a step, but I'm going to get really practical here. There's some trees that are beautiful during the Tulip Festival, but some of our best nature trees, best wildlife trees aren't doing that much during the Tulip Festival, like oak trees. They're not even really fully leafed out yet. They're just starting right now.
Nice fall festival.
But during the 4th of July, we're so grateful to have a big oak tree with a lot of shade,
That's what I was
But I-
actually, I thought would
Yeah,
be,
and oak trees are
Shade Festival,
yeah.
a shade
Well, a
festival of the
festival,
weekend.
sure. And oak trees they're one of the best wildlife trees. So anyway, I think if we got a group of people who are good at this sort of thing, we could come up with things. As far as code, well, if we're gonna be protecting trees during construction, I think we will need code for that. And I think LPC knows far better than me where to put it and how to structure it. I can help with what kind of things are useful for protecting trees, what kind of practices are useful for protecting trees, but actually where to put it and how to structure it and when it kicks in. That's something I think the expertise in this group needs to kick in on.
I can help with that.
Yeah, and Janelle,
And our attorney.
and eventually it'll have to be part of the attorney's thing review. Education, like I said, that's already a component in chapter 177, the tree chapter. We may or may not need to ask for more funding on that. I don't envision we'd actually need code for that, but we may or may not want more funding and more structure. It'd be helpful to have more people involved to do that. With it's something we'd have to talk about, and I'd like to bring at the right time bring Janet in to talk about how to structure that to make it more effective. As far as heritage trees or significant trees, whatever we end up calling it, I think it depends on where we end up with that, whether we would need code or not. I'm just not sure. I think it could be part of overall enhancing the public attention to trees if we were to recognize extraordinary trees of one sort or another. Cape Gazette, or what have you, plaques. I'm not sure what it would all include, but it's part of the overall enhancement of our respect for trees and our affection for trees.
Marty, there's not necessarily addressed specifically to you, but to everybody. I think there's a risk involved in the heritage tree program if you're not going to protect them.
Yeah.
The city's going to stake itself out, and then one day somebody's going to cut one down, and we're going to be sitting here with our hands in our pockets, and it ain't going to look good.
Yeah, I'm very discouraged. I thought that the tree recognition program would be great, but when there's no protection, I don't see any reason going forward with it at all. So.
Okay, and I did check just to, I said, I'm trying not to give too many comments at this point, but I did inquire about where that would fall as falling under code, and it wouldn't really be something that would fall under code. The education and the reason I guess it's under chapter 177 with the Parks and Rec is because those are city-owned trees.
Well,
So
there are a few places where 177 goes beyond city-owned trees, and there's a specific couple paragraphs that say that the Parks and Rec help citizens with trees. We advise LPC when they're looking at new subdivisions. We also help
right,
citizens.
and
with
there's a
trees if they want.
procedure that's discussed in there with, with the how the subdivisions go to Parks and Rec before.
Yeah, that's in the park. Yeah, that's in the subdivision procedure, but just in general, in 177, there's something that says, and
But does it also fall under the larger code that just is addressing the role of Parks and Rec
yeah,
and the
it's part of Parks
tasks
and
and
Rec. It's one
the
of the roles of Parks and
and
Rec.
responsibilities? That's what
Yeah,
the primary goal of that section is, right? Like, is defining the role of Parks and Rec.
it's part of one of the roles of Parks and Rec is to educate. I wish I had it at hand. I can look for it as we speak and I can read it to you,
Okay.
but yeah, it's in here.
Okay, all right, well, I've got everything noted here. And Rich, what we're doing is we're just going around one by one. Have you had an opportunity to watch Mayor and City Council? Great. Okay, if I would just, we're kind of going around, where do where would you like to see the tree subcommittee go? What do you think the direction should be? Are there tasks that we can work on?
So I don't know that I want to give up entirely on on creating a tree recognition program to identify and protect. And in this regard, that if we provide incentives for homeowners, landowners to come forward, and either people in the community or people on on the property themselves can nominate certain trees for recognition, for a program, I've had people approach me in my neighborhood, to say, oh, these beautiful pines that are in my neighborhood, ought to be included in this recognition program. And that there were incentives of some kind that the city could provide if the landowner wanted. Now, it would have to be voluntary, of course. And this gets a little complicated. So bear with me for a second. But that if they were put forward, nominated and said, okay, we're going to protect, we're going to recognize these trees. And if the landowner so wanted, that the city would provide care, possibly care for those trees, and then go a step further here, and maybe even take on some of the liability if there were a problem with some of those trees down the road. But that all of a sudden, that landowner, that property owner, has an incentive to come forward and have these trees recognized, protected by the city, and that they would not be taken down unless, for the reasons that we've all discussed, unless it was diseased or there were an imminent danger, to property or something. But all of a sudden, we've got an incentive program here for the great trees that we care about in this community. And some landowners may have no interest in doing that. Others may. And there may be some neighborhood interest in doing that and coming together around that.
The problem is, let's say that the house is sold. What's to protect those trees from being cut down when the new owner is there, or the person that nominated them or owns them passes away and the house is sold and there's somebody else? There's no protection right now.
Or would it, once a tree is named a remarkable tree, is it named a remarkable tree and that is something that cannot be removed?
But
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I think we'd have to explore that further with a lawyer. I've looked into it a little bit. I think there's ways to do it. But you'd have to have the homeowner agree that you would have a condition placed on it that would somehow run with the land. And then the city would have to,
Right, 'cause it
pay
can't-
money to get it maintained. But it could be done, but it's a matter of budgeting it and getting the right legal documents in place.
It's-
Now,
it's
whether
sort of
anybody
like-
would be
it's sort
agree to
of
do
like-
that or not, I don't know.
I
I
would
mean,
add,
it may inhibit the sale of the property, so I don't know if
It
anybody
could
would
verge
agree
on
to
a
it.
taking because, if I'm correct, because it would single out individuals over, as opposed to having a tree ordinance that was for everyone. A situation like that could result in it being interpreted as a taking. It's
So a homeowner, if they wanted to, could make it a private deed restriction to that they have that, they have to conserve the tree. Because again, I think we all recognize that trees won't be here forever. But because if there's some kind of need and it gets diseased or something happens, that it could come down, but they could do a potential deed restriction, and that's a private agreement between that property owner and somebody going forward that tree needs to be preserved. That's something that would be a private deed restriction that could be considered.
I like Rich's idea of this incentive. I think the city council, however, is going to have a problem with it, because how do you budget for that? You never know when you're going to need $10,000 for, the damage the tree did when it fell over or something to that extent.
That's true with all the cities, all the city trees right now. I mean,
Well, that's what I'm saying.
we
is
try to
taking-
manage them so they don't fall over, but
Taking on new liability, I
happens.
think is going to be a little
Yeah.
scary for the city.
I'd like to also broaden the discussion, because now we're talking about funds. And we started out by talking about enlarging the canopy. So there are competitive uses for potential funds. One is, this type of tree program. Another is planting. Another is maintenance of the existing canopy. And I think before committing to Rich's idea, should have some sort of discussion about what is our priority for the limited amount of funds that may be available.
And not just for trees in general, the limited amount of funds. My reaction on this would be the taking issue that I brought up, number one. But number two, that I would actually ask you that if this is possible, to do research to find some examples of where similar programs have been successfully adopted. And if that was the case, to return to city council as a member of the subcommittee, to share that idea and share the background support, share the idea, and see if we wanted to be tasked with something like that, or perhaps present it to LPC first. What do you think?
I think you've got
Because it is a little bit of a new idea. I'm not against the incentives. I've never been against the incentives. I just haven't seen any examples of the incentives provided. And that's where that has been my concern. And
Maybe it's a tax rebate.
I had thought about that.
Maybe it's just nominal, but hey, everybody looks for.
I had thought about that too. And again, it gets into a city funding issue. But I had to most definitely, that's the obvious one.
You could budget for that though. That there's going to be, 50 or whatever it might be, tax rebates offered this year, and maybe, 75 next year and 100 after that. I mean, it's something, again, that's tangible that you can get your hands around, as opposed to saying, well, we'll pay for,
then we set standards for how you qualify.
yeah.
And
Such
then-
and such kind of tree or size, whatever, and yeah.
And what is the responsibility of the city? The tree recognition program, I think they were comfortable with. It's how is that implemented, and what kind of carrots and incentives does it have? What then falls on the city for responsibility for that tree? Or is it just a lovely recognition program that we we encourage people to go out and see that and maybe learn about that tree. And I'm tying in the educational portion. And then how do we get them to plant, another tree like that, hey, you can cultivate a type of tree on your property for your children or your grandchildren. Because that then comes back to increasing the canopy. That is the overall goal. So I think you can tie it to a number of different things, and not just the city's going to take over responsibility. It's like, how do we encourage and turn it into an educational, if you wanted to do it that way, or what other incentives are there?
And Rich, did you have anything else to add, or was that?
No, I think that
Okay.
was the,
I have some other
Okay.
things I'd like to add. Earth Day is coming up. And it would be, that's the kind of opportunity where, there could be a table somewhere and free trees that we're giving
There
out.
actually is.
All that kind of thing.
There is going to be an event, but it's not through the Parks and Rec. Let me see, I actually discovered this today. Bear with me for a moment, because I just invited people to this event.
While you're
It's
looking,
the
at
one at
that.
Stango Park, and it's from the sponsor of the group. Let me see if I can find this. It's under events, and
Is that the one on the 29th, April 29th?
yes, it's April 29th.
That's an Arbor Day thing, and it's not the official city Arbor Day thing.
No, it's the
But they're-
organization is something in the coalition, the
The
Sussex.
coalition of something or other, and they're planting a tree, the city. Well, so here's what's happening on the 28th, which is officially Earth Day. The city's Earth Day, not Earth Day, Arbor Day. The city's Arbor Day celebration is going to be, we're planting a red oak tree out at Great Marsh Park. A gentleman from Sussex Tree is going to talk about the benefits of trees and the importance of controlling invasives. And they're going to plant a tree. They're donating a red oak and planting a tree. They're also planting a white oak in Stango Park. I think it's near the intersection of Adams and like where the trail is, really near that area. I'm not exactly sure the exact, and then on the 29th, that group is going to have some sort of event surrounding that tree. I
I'm
don't
trying
know
to
what they're
find it
doing.
because, oh wait, here it is. Because I actually responded to this.
So if you can come out, I believe it's 10 o'clock on the 28th at Great Marsh Park. We're going to be planning a
Is
tree.
where, okay, is the city Earth
Intersection
Day.
of Park Road and Great Marsh Circle.
And the other event is Family Arbor Day event at Stango Park. From the Sussex Preservation Coalition. And that is taking place from 10:30 to 12:30. Says this Arbor Day event will learn about the importance of trees and plants, meet environmentalists from around the county and state, kick off our tree protection campaign, Trees Equal Livable Communities, TLC. So that is a county-wide effort, which I'm absolutely thrilled to see. And I hope I'm in town that weekend because I plan on going.
That's the 29th.
That is the 29th, 10:30 to 12:30. The event will begin with the benediction given near our newly planted white oak tree. Is that the one that you're planting? The white oak, or are they planting a white oak?
A white oak will be planted for the Stango
Okay.
Park event. We're planting a red oak out in Great Marsh
Okay.
Park.
And this is interesting. In memory of trees lost to deforestation in Sussex County. After the benediction, we will move to the open air stage next to Lewis Library and hear from state botanist Bill McAvoy about the importance of forests, trees, and plants, about the impacts of losing them. After his talk, we will officially kick off our Trees Equal Livable Communities TLC campaign. Our audience will then be encouraged to walk around and meet the allies of the Sussex Preservation Coalition. And then they're giving away white dogwood seedlings. But it's the Sussex Preservation Coalition. I'm looking for a website to share. Janelle, I don't know, is this something we could list
No.
as
no.
a
So,
resource because
I-
we've discussed it
so
here?
here's the issue with that. That's a political entity. And so the city is allowing to do it, but it's not something Parks and Rec can be intimately involved with because they're taking a political stance on certain political issues. So they're allowed to have their event there, but it's not actually a city event. The city event is the day before.
Okay. Okay. Well, I hope people have heard about that and I personally will share that and because.
It was mentioned during the council meeting last night. So
Yeah.
definitely got some word out. And I think Janet might be doing something else she does her best to get as much word out as possible about everything
know.
in Parks and Rec. And Marina.
Press release on Arbor Day, so.
Okay, good, good.
I was gonna add a few more things.
I'm sorry, I know, and okay, and then, because I never actually gave my input. But I'll wait till the end, till,
Okay. The scouts are always looking for opportunities to do something. I remember a couple of months ago, a scout group came to the planning commission meeting. And afterwards, one of the gentlemen said to me, you know, if you can think of any projects, let us know. So they're looking for things to do.
they are.
And
They
you
are
know,
always, I actually, I would confirm this too, because I have a number of friends whose sons are involved in scouts. And in also Eagle Scouts in particular, I think are active locally and do projects. And they take on, they write the plan, they do the project, and they collect the manpower and the resources. So
also,
it's,
when I was teaching, we organized again for Earth Day, a planting at like 6 elementary schools in Baltimore City, having the students work on it. And we got free trees from the state. So, and our students planned where the trees were to go. So
Yep.
they were all on site helping the kids plant, and
we did the same thing at my school.
Yeah, last Arbor Day, we had we had a partnership with the Roots and Shoots. It's a teen organization at the library, the Lewis Public Library. And we planted 25 trees in George H.P. Smith Park. We made a grove. And we were able to get trees in like 3-gallon pots, which is something that group could handle. Most of the trees I plant are big ball and burlap, and they're too hard to manage.
Or their
But
whips.
and they're doing great. You go out there, they're really doing great. So
Okay, and then my last comment was relative to the construction period. And that's to perhaps create a guidebook or at least guidelines for developers, builders, and homeowners for construction period protections of trees. I think that would be
Probably things out there that we could.
absolutely, yeah. But I know we can put a lot of things in an ordinance, but I don't know how many people actually read the ordinances.
they don't.
I think it's a guidebook of some kind, and it could just be, 2 pages or, a small handbook of some kind. And I'm sure the city could probably fund that, because I don't think we would need to make 100,
We could, at the beginning of what we have is pre-construction meetings. And then as projects progress, we have a monthly construction meeting. So we could hand that out to them at their pre-construction meeting. So it's like, hey.
So when you're talking about the pre-construction meetings, are you talking about every project or only subdivisions or?
Depends on the project. Typically, it's always the major subdivisions, and it depends on the scope of the commercial developments.
And for just
institutional.
individual applicants, with doing work on their properties, we would have to get this also shared with them via the building.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we could put on the building permits page. We're working on trying to what information should we be providing?
That would be,
And more information. So we can definitely put it on the planning and building department pages. So when people are coming, we can always, have a handout that goes with the building permits, or, especially if we know there's a tree on the property. We don't always know there's a tree on the property. The surveys aren't showing trees on the property. But, we can,
Maybe the checklist needs to be changed.
well, then your survey cost goes up. But that's something.
For Lewis, I don't think that's an issue.
yeah, when people are paying, what average, $1 million an acre, well, actually well over $1 million an acre. I don't think it's probably, I don't think it's going to be, the survey cost is going to be a shocker for anyone. So maybe we need to look at that as part of code.
Again, if you're talking tree construction protection, it's going to go into the subdivision code, because that's what handles all tree protection, and for major subdivisions, minor subdivisions, and land development, which would be your commercial developments and institutional developments.
But if we're talking about protection of trees, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'm making like a parking lot note here. Bear with me.
If we want to create a guideline, I think we'd be happy to hand that out and take a look at it. Make sure, the word gets out.
I'd like to give it to the homeowners too, because they don't necessarily know, and they are the ones, for the most part, to make sure if construction is going on, that it's, that they, protect the trees.
Maybe
A lot of homeowners don't understand necessarily how important it is.
Yeah, and typically who's picking up the building permit are the contractors. We could try something maybe in the tax bill or in the Lewis Light, the newsletter, because we try to get information out that way. So I think we've got a bunch of different ways to try and get information out, and then go, hey, you can, QR code and go to the webpage, or here's the link to the webpage.
I just think
or just have a handout.
we just need more public outreach. But did you have anything else to add? Were you finished?
Well, just relative to that, I didn't add engineers in there, and I think engineers and planners need to be aware of it, not just to the developers and builders. So, maybe we talk to one of their at one of their meetings or something like that.
All right. I think it's time for me to give my feedback. I'll make no bones about it. I've been, as the chair of this committee, who has been very upfront about seeking a tree ordinance that did regulate trees on private property. I was disappointed, both with our last meeting of the tree subcommittee, but of the reaction from mayor and city council as well. And, neighboring communities have tree ordinances. I truly do believe that people who want to remove trees, i.e. developers, there aren't going to be incentives that the city of Lewis could afford to give that are going to prevent them from cutting down trees. Just because the benefit of development is so financially great that I just do not see it to be anything realistic. That said, I had two personal choices that I had to make after this, which were, well, a number of personal choices, which were I could just say, well, this isn't going to happen, and I've wasted my time, and let's move on to something else that, is another important topic, which I can use my own human resources for. For example, I do have an interest in the workforce housing, and I am going to join that committee as well. My second choice would be that I could just say, okay, well, let's embrace the one piece of code that has been given, and and then leave the other tasks more that are not code driven to volunteers who want to get these things off the ground. Or the last one would be to just fully embrace it and say, okay, well, let's start a public, just as we have an art committee, start a public tree committee and volunteer to be at the helm of it and all of that. I'm going to go through that first. I am not the person to do that. My expertise and my strength is as someone who is, I think I reach for it, but I'm visionary and aspirational. And what I was seeking out of this did not happen. I do not have the arborist background, deep knowledge of trees to be that person who is a good person to lead a tree, like we have a public art committee. I'm just not a good person for that because I don't have the background, the technical knowledge. So that's off for me. So my other two choices I'm left with are just call it a day and say we failed and oh well. And I'm going to say that I'm not going to do that because just that would be a juvenile way to do things. And I'm not that person. And, we've put in hard work. I think that getting something out of this is a resolution that I can live with. But I do have limits on how much I am willing to put into it when I am not sure that the outcome is going to be far-reaching and long-lasting. But I am in favor of moving forward with creating a code to protect trees in construction areas. And I like the idea I just heard about a corresponding booklet. I think we should do that. In addition, the chairman of the LPC, Stacy, has also asked that I bring up to the subcommittee here that would we look at woodland protection? Because that is a task that has been assigned to the environmental subcommittee, but they have a lot of other tasks too. And the chair of that subcommittee would be Amy Marasco, would be requested that she would be quite happy if we would look at that task as well. So, Janelle, I'm willing to do that. What I'm also willing to do is that I think that we could come up with some aspirational goals for things like a remarkable tree program, for the education that is needed, and kind of pass these on to the city to decide, do they want to start a committee to do that? Is this something that needs to go out to the community for, tree advocates that are volunteers in the way that Lewis and Bloom is? I would love to have Lewis and Bloom come in. I'm not asking them to take on anything else because I think they're doing a lot with already, but I don't see that as the role of a Lewis Planning Commission, which is who I am representing here. As for education, I think that Councilwoman Jones, her reaction summed it up. I think we need a lot more for education. And it's not a personal accusation at you, Marty, or at Parks and Rec. It's that people don't seem to be aware that there are educational opportunities for them. I know that there are, but I didn't before I got on the road for this process. And I think some of the things like reaching out, doing more broad education, does need to happen. Also social media, and more perhaps events that are feel-good events, and perhaps connecting with other groups that are, that are clearly they're forming around the county, and they're forming around the county because they've seen tremendous deforestation, appalling deforestation throughout this county, worse than anything that we have seen in Lewis. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to mute my phone. I had it on because I was calling you. That's why. There's my excuse. So that's kind of what I would like to do, is move forward work on this code, get a code written, get it through. Get something on paper in the building code for trees that would protect trees on all building sites. Because that's what it would do. Even if we had something only in our subdivision sites, it would only include large construction sites. But there's lots of construction in the city of Lewis that occurs that isn't just on large building sites. So sadly, without a tree ordinance that prohibits removal of trees, it might be a completely moot bill because every tree can be removed. And so I don't want to spend a tremendous amount of time on it. Janelle, what I would like to do is get a fast and clean code written.
Okay.
And Mary Linda has very generously already started doing some research on that.
Yeah, I can take Mary Linda's research, start drafting an ordinance. I'm not sure I'll have it ready for next
No,
week.
and I don't expect you to.
But
I
I
would
just
like
wanted to give you that
everyone though
heads up.
to take time to let's look at what Mary Linda sent out and look at what we think might work for Lewis. And because I think that's really the only thing that we can include in a code. You know, that's it. I do think we need more education, but I think that's more of a recommendation than it is a code. And I don't think it's something that should just fall on you. You have a whole, it's more of something that the city has to take on as a priority.
Well, I found the section is, chapter 177, section 3. So 3C7, the duties of the tree authority, Parks and Rec is the tree authority. 7 is to educate the public about the benefits of trees and their proper care. And then section 177-3 Delta D is operation of PRC. PRC shall appoint an educational liaison from its membership to work with the public. When a greater level of expertise is needed, the PRC can request assistance from Sussex County Cooperative Extension Agency and/or the Delaware Department of Agriculture, Forest Service, Urban and Community Forestry Program, or if such does not exist, the successor agency. Anyway, so there's certainly contemplation of this additional education baked in to this chapter, and having more people involved. I mean, it's been
And having
me and Janet,
volunteers, yeah.
and having more volunteers involved is certainly. Now, Lewis and Bloom is quite a bit different in that Lewis and Bloom doesn't actually educate the public. Lewis and Bloom goes out there and plants things,
Right.
and then we have to spend time educating the Lewis and Bloom members on how to do it sometimes. So this is a completely different thing. So as far
Yes,
as
it is. I was
you know
never,
how we would educate, I mean, what a tree advocacy group would do, I think it's an intriguing idea. I love the idea, but you'd have to define what it would do. If you encourage people to plant trees and help them plant them, that'd be great. That'd be great, because a lot of trees are planted incorrectly, and if they're going to plant them, I'd like them planted correctly and then maintained correctly. I love the idea of having some kind of a pamphlet that tells not only builders, but homeowners what to do if you're doing construction near a tree. I think there's a lot of lack of understanding about protecting the tree roots, protecting the grading so you don't start putting more water on the tree or whatever. There's all kinds of things to do to protect the tree. And I think if we have something like that, we can give to homeowners. Now, the builders, honestly, most of the time, the builders, they're just eager to get the building done regardless. It's the homeowner. If they want to protect the tree, they're the ones that are going to make the builder do it correctly. So.
oh yeah, it's going to be the homeowners, and it's also going to be the code inspectors who are going to have to enforce this code. And this code needs to be enforced at, it's going to need to be, and it's, to be honest with you, I know how this works sometimes. It's a neighbor. It's the old tattletale method. It's how code gets enforced in Lewis a lot of times.
And if we have good guidance out there that give people what to look for, I mean, it's like that one development I talked about where I saw something happening. I called City Hall. I emailed Anne Marie and she sent you out to fix it.
And that
Sometimes that's what it
happens
takes.
all the time, all day long.
We've got a code enforcement officer. She is out every day, but she can't hit everything.
And
at
her
the-
expertise is not trees, frankly.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I think we can give her some education. So what I'm hearing is you guys have got 3 projects that I'm hearing right now is that you really want to focus on the construction ordinance for the preservation of the trees. You want to start research on a woodland protection ordinance. And then you want to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into the education tree. And this is me asking for, how would you feel about writing a little article for the Lewis Light about how to protect trees and just something small or something that, and I think that can go a long way. And then, so you're going to look at that. And then of course we still have the tree recognition program. I think it's just going to take, do you guys want to still move forward with it more being carrot and initiative than full regulation? I think, so you've got 3 really big ones. And then it's like, what do you want to do with the tree recognition program?
Well,
There
and then we have
are
the
a few
forest.
dangling participles.
Yeah, the
out
woodland protection.
there. A few dangling participles out there that I
Absolutely.
make sure that we understand that we're leaving money on the table if we don't talk about them. One is council's interest in expanding the canopy by actually a very defined percentage.
Mhm.
And are we washing our hands of that?
Absolutely not.
They've already
Absolutely
signed a
not.
goal. So they've already signed the goal saying we want to increase the canopy.
And again, I'm
So
just,
that's there. That's in the.
And-
Oh, I'm not talking about goal. I'm talking about implementation of it.
yes,
Oh.
and I will also, can I, or finish up and then I'll go back to that.
And the other thing was we really need a more current canopy study.
That,
I am,
That's-
yeah, I've tagged, I sent an email recently to the state again, asking for status on that and, I'll make some phone calls, but yeah.
and Marty, there's one other thing with this too. I think we really need to, in order to know what we're dealing with and in order to report back to mayor and city council. We've talked about this before, but the last time was 2014. Since then, we have taken on, we've annexed new areas and in particular Highland Acres, we annexed is heavily wooded. So that was a boom for us for the percentage. That was definitely going to be a gain. However, we also had, some work in the 4th Street forest. Some may not affect the canopy because it was understory work, but some
It's hard to know.
will.
And some of the trees that were left might have expanded their canopy because they had less competition. So,
So, but
well, my last email to the urban and community forestry was to ask them specifically, I'd like 2 measurements. And
that's
I'd
what
like-
that's what the
one that
LPC was
said,
asking for.
Give me the current canopy based on the old city limits.
Yes.
Giving me the current canopy based on the new city limits. I don't know whether it's possible for me to get both. I don't know. But I'm making a play. We're trying to base our program on scientific data. And you need to move one variable at a time to really know. So I don't know whether I'll get that or not.
And-
Apparently they can't do it all within their own expertise. They get outside expertise to do some of the work, some of the.
And if we can't,
work.
if they're not willing to do it, if there's a financial reason, this is something that needs to be done for the comprehensive plan for the city of Lewis. We are going to, I would be very comfortable asking for the funds if we need to get this done, but it needs to be done properly. And we absolutely need to have 2014 area versus 2014 area. And then we could look at our overall, including the annexations areas, but we're also going to look at some in the annexation areas. As you well know, we have Brittingham or, the Lewis Waterfront Retreat, pardon me. And
Donovan Smith.
Donovan
There's trees
Smith.
in there.
And then, yes, Donovan Smith absolutely
And
has trees.
there's trees in Lewis Watford Preserve. They didn't,
Well, the exterior tree areas
yeah,
there
they
are.
didn't take a whole lot of trees out of
But the
there.
other area too is where Dutchman's Harvest, that was that annexed or was that?
No, that's been
No,
at
so
the
that
city.
was, okay. All right.
And they
So that's
planted a
going to
bunch of
be,
a nice buffer there.
I
Well,
was just gonna suggest, is that possibly something that the intern could do? The young woman who was introduced yesterday?
so the environmental subcommittee has an intern. That might be beyond her scope and beyond her expertise, because I'm thinking this is more GIS work.
I bet she's working on GIS.
We'd have to look into it, and we'd have to make sure, because my job is to make sure she stays on scope and money.
I've
So I
been,
don't get yelled at.
Marty,
I've been,
Are there-
I've been asking the state to make this a topic of extended training for the tree stewards such as myself and Janet. But what I'm thinking is I'm going to see if I could get them to get us an expert to train us on what tree canopy measurement is all about. I can tell you this from the bit I've read, there's a lot of different ways to measure. There's a lot of debate on which is the most accurate. And if you do two different methodologies, you're going to be comparing apples and oranges. So
That was going to be my
And
question too.
yeah.
There are different measurements, the depths of measurement, I guess is a way to look at it. It used to be just head counting, but now you can count heads as well as measure health and other sorts of things. So what would you recommend?
They do satellite imaging, and somehow they tell me they can tell the difference between a tree, a turf grass, and a tree, and perennial plantings. So I don't know, and a tree and a shrub is what they say. I don't know how they do that. So I would love to have more education on that. But I'm gonna make another play for that.
Because what I'm hearing is you've got, it sounds like because I know we've got a couple people that have to leave, is the big thing is definitely we're running with the tree protection. If everybody's going to do a little research, get it to me. I'm going to start drafting an ordinance based on the wonderful research Mary Linda's done. Maybe everybody does a little bit of research on woodland forest protection ordinances that might be out there.
I would love to have a definition of that because I'm not sure exactly what LPC has in
I
it as
second
far as
that.
woodland ordinances.
And-
Because I would love to look into it. It sounds lovely. I just need more information.
So I know Kent County has a woodland forest protection, and then so does the city of Dover. So
Okay.
if somebody wants to look at those, see if that's something you're interested in.
If somebody could send the links out to those, that would be great.
I would like to first just keep our focus narrow on this, get this construction ordinance through. Go through the,
Right.
I think we
Yeah.
need to focus on that,
Yeah.
then move on to the woodland protections and then kind of late, but I do think a priority is get the canopy measurement too.
Marty, are you,
I'm sorry.
I have a question. Are you familiar with Davy Tree's tree keeper service that they provide? Do you know,
I'm familiar with Davy Trees, but as far as the tree keeper service,
I believe that Rehoboth Beach used this in like 2014, and they came and surveyed their trees, and it was at no cost.
The city.
Yes. Mhm. And it's called Tree Keeper, and I wondered if you were aware of it and what,
and they, as far as what recommendations on maintaining, pruning, that sort of thing.
no, on health of the trees,
Yeah.
what's hazardous.
Well, we've used Bartlett, and Bartlett actually did do an extensive set of recommendations a few years ago on trees that needed pruning, cabling, yada, yada, yada.
But did they look at trees on private property as well?
Not on private property.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, Davies did.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Can I just ask a question going back to the code for construction areas? Because we had a discussion, which I found very intriguing, about using GPS to look at taking a snapshot back in time, so that if a landowner were going to clear cut his property just prior to selling it to a developer, that we could somehow use GPS to deter that kind of behavior. Is that something that we're going to try to get at in this?
Rich, I think we lost our opportunity because we did not pass through our subcommittee to put protections in place for private trees.
Well, as far as
And-
woodlots though, with that,
Woodlots.
So again,
For woodland, okay.
it all
Woodlands?
depends on when the date of the ordinance is adopted, because that's when a code takes effect. It
Right.
cannot go backwards. So the sooner we get the construction code written, the sooner we can start working on the forest woodland ordinance, the sooner you can
Yes.
protect or attempt to protect wooded forested lots in the city.
Yes.
No, that's.
And you know
that's-
what? I think in our travels, just taking a very informal inventory, as we notice where there are wooded lots, undeveloped lots, just could be useful to us just to know. Since we all live in almost different neighborhoods. That just, yeah, but there are some wooded lots. I have some in my street, which is, who are in the hands of pretty good stewards, the ones that are on my street, but, yeah, so I think that we've copied all, just to reiterate, so let's start on the construction ordinance. And I'm going to ask everyone if they can read through what Mary Linda sent out. Then go into the woodland protection. Also wrote here, number 3, about just because it's such a priority, keeping it on the list of getting the canopy measurements done. Later, exploring for recommendations, basically. Number 1, remarkable trees.
right, can I make a mention? I think it'd be worthwhile to put together a set of bullet points or something that we could pass up the chain on remarkable trees. And if we want to make a recommendation that says something along the lines of, if you want to protect these trees and this important part of the tree canopy, we think it would be most effective if we did X, Y, and Z. And talk about the private deeds, whatever. Now, maybe the mayor and city council don't go there, but at least we'd be on record saying we think this is what it would take.
Yeah, and I think that we there's no point in putting time into it without bringing it there. And I'm also going to say that incentive programs, and Rich, I'm going to task you again with this, just seeing if you can find anything that are examples that have worked.
I want to look at jurisdictions where they have recognition programs and see if anything goes beyond just, a little plaque or something,
And when you are ready, I'm going to ask if you can give a report, to our committee first, and then we can, share it with LPC. So, but for right now, number 1 priority is getting this construction ordinance done. Then we can look at woodland protections, and could we add it potentially to, what I'm envisioning here with this construction ordinance is it would be a different section. It wouldn't be 177. It would be under the zoning, correct?
It's gonna go in the subdivision and land development code. It's gonna go,
Okay.
it makes most sense to go in chapter 170.
Okay, but if
we
it's
can
in
look at-
subdivision and land development, does it apply to all lots or only to?
It'll apply to major subdivisions, minor subdivisions, and commercial and institutional industrial developments.
So it won't apply to private lots,
Well,
to individual lots?
not typically, no, it wouldn't impact a individual homeowner.
So we need
but
to
we
look
can
at
it.
what area we can put it in that it will. What are other possibilities? Okay, so let me just write this down. I'm just gonna, where can we? just into the zoning code?
Yeah, it would go in the zoning code then if that's.
I
what you
would
want.
vote for zoning code. Because I want it to be comprehensive for everyone. And then so we could just add a section, trees in the zoning code.
No, I'd probably put it in the environmental section and just a new
Okay.
subsection in there, probably.
So if we
'Cause we've already
started with
got it in
that,
Environmental.
right, if we started with that, then we could down the road, if we were able, add a woodlands protection under the same section, correct?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll find the right spot.
Yeah, so right there, we've already done something meaningful. This has been a productive meeting and I think at I'm gonna say 14.
5:16.
But
It
Five
is
sixteen,
constantly
okay.
slow, no matter what we do. It's like, it
May
mocks
I add
us.
one more little thought for the day? When you talk about something that will work, there's nothing that works 100%. In fact, we've all seen articles about, notwithstanding the strict tree protections in Washington, there are some people who will cut down the tree because they want to cut down the tree and they'll pay for the fine as a cost of
Mhm.
doing business. So nothing is 100%.
Oh, we've seen that. We've
But,
seen it.
but I wanna, what I'm looking for is things that will shift the balance a reasonable percentage and do some good. I don't expect 100%.
I agree. And I just want to say that I'm glad that Deborah, that you're not just stepping down. I understand your frustration. I think I share a lot of it, but let's keep at this. This is important stuff. This is part of our
Yeah.
community,
Yeah.
and we have a mission here. And I'm glad that you're sticking with it.
And, I'll make it very clear. I personally still have the goal of seeing trees in Lewis protected from, the acts for construction. And if this is where we have to start, then let's start here. But starting nowhere is not an option. So, I would like to do I have to make a motion or no? I'm going to adjourn this meeting of the Lewis Tree Subcommittee at 5:17, and our next meeting is at
18 at the Wellness Center.
okay. Oh, meeting adjourned.